So thanks for being here, Eli. It's great to have an opportunity to talk to you.
I'm excited to be here. It's an honor. As you know, I've been a fan of you longer than I've been practicing as a patent attorney. So I'm excited.
Well, thank you. That can't be right because I'm really not that old. But so this is interesting. I have a smile on my face because I had the opportunity to sit down with you, and when you interviewed me years ago, and so it's a pleasure to have you in my crosshairs today.
You were one of my early Closette interviews. I actually just was coming across some document I put together about my dream guests when I first started the podcast,
Yeah.
And you were on the top 5 on top of the list.
Well,
and,
I'm glad. I appreciate that, and it's been fun to see how Closette has grown, and I just absolutely love your tagline, the voice of IP. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. Maybe we could just start there and talk about that. How did you get into doing Closette, and why did you decide to do it? Because you started this before podcasts were really they were a thing, but they weren't like the thing that they are today.
Yeah. So actually, I always loved long form interviews, even before there was I guess podcasting. Whatever they had on PBS or Talk Radio or whatever. I love the idea of somebody just talking to somebody and finding out their story, even though you might have never been interested in that person. Before that, just listening to the conversation, you kind of learn about them and you kind of identify them or you don't. And I used to watch a lot of these kind of interviews in the venture capital field, and I never was interested in going in that field, but I just thought it'd be a cool way to kind of discover that area. And I'm like, is there anything like this in patents or IP? And I Googled, there wasn't.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, let me try to do this. And I started doing that one interview at a time. It's been a bit of a journey, but I'm glad I stuck with it. Got to meet lots of great people along the way.
Yeah, no, you do, and I've had that experience. Our podcast is pretty new, but I've had a similar experience with the writing. Meet just all kinds of people from all over the world, and people that you wouldn't, when you first start out, you wouldn't think that you would ever have any reason to meet, or they would know you. And it's been a journey. It's one foot in front of the other. It's interesting. We spend a lot of our professional life advising people who are inventors and creators, and really that's what we do is we create, right?
Yeah, it's. I've never thought of myself as an artistic person or anything like that, but it really kind of forces you to draw on things that I guess are within us. But yes, seeing you do it obviously to an immense level of success. My podcast is a very modest version of that, but it's kind of it's a cool experience and cool. Obviously, I think me and you share that we're kind of, even if we could do anything in the world, we'd still be kind of doing this.
Probably
right?
still be doing something like this, very similar to this. Yeah,
we love. I don't maybe there's something wrong with us, but we just love talking about patents in our free time.
There's some people that would think that does make something wrong with us. But yeah, it's been fun. The one thing that amazed me when I sat down for our interview, you had obviously done an awful lot of background research, and you had talked to some people who I can only kind of guess who they were, because you knew stuff about me that happened 20, 30 years earlier. So walk me through, that process. I mean, because it is a creative process that you obviously go through, because you do interviews very differently than pretty much anybody else that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I guess the way I think about it, and I think Howard Stern, I'm not I used to listen to his stuff. I can't say I'm a particular fan of him now, but I think the way he interviews people is he just has a long conversation with them. Mm-hmm. And even though in the beginning, if you started asking them, some kind of questions, they probably wouldn't say anything interesting. But after they have this long conversation, they feel comfortable. They tell him things that not necessarily they wouldn't want to tell him, but all of a sudden they feel like, oh, I should tell him,
Yeah, it's safe, right? And you know who else? So when I first started, I wasn't doing the podcast, but I would do the long form interviews, and then we would transcribe them, and then we would publish them. And when I was doing that, sort of my inspiration was a guy named James Limpton, who did Inside the Actor Studio. You know? And so one of the things that I tried to always do at the end was like he did. These fun, silly, get to know you kind of questions, and and he would ask crazy things. I kind of tamed it down, a little bit, but he'd ask things like boxers or briefs, or and just all kinds of personal stuff. So I kind of came up with my own version of that a little bit, and I would ask people things like, for example, Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Yeah.
So let's just do that. Star Wars versus Star Trek.
I'm not a sci-fi guy, but
oh my God, you're not a you just, I think, lost your nerd card. So what if you're not a sci-fi guy? What got you into patents then? And I asked it that way because a lot of us were motivated to become engineers because of science fiction, and then from there, engineering and patents, it takes on a life of its own. But what was your inspiration?
Yeah, good question. So my dad was an engineer. He was a PhD in electrical engineering, and actually him and my mom ended up becoming computer programmers. So when I was going to college, I was like, all right, I should study something practical, But by that point, I had enough computer programming experience to know that I wouldn't want to do it as a career, right? So I was going to get a computer science degree, but I had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to do something with it, right? At the same time, I was always interested in the law. I would always watch Court TV. I don't know if you remember on the cable, and People's Court and all that.
Judge Wapner.
Yeah. So I was interested in. I didn't know anything about patents or patent law, but I had this idea. I'm like, well, computers are becoming a big thing, and the law. There will be some kind of intersection between computers and the law that I'll kind of find out for maybe computer crimes or something like that. And I ended up at GW Law School and GW undergrad, and they had some patent attorneys come talk to us, and they told us how much they enjoyed their career, how much they loved it. And I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty good. That seems like a good path to go, and that's kind of got me started at it. But I think that is kind of what separates me maybe from a lot of patent attorneys. I think some patent attorneys are either whenever I hear about an invention and I learn about it, I'm like, whoa, what a great invention, because I'm the kind of guy who's like, oh, I could have come up with it, So I think that helps me kind of be a compelling advocate for clients. And some people have the opposite problem. I remember when I started practicing, we'd have these PhDs who were at the same firm I was, and they'd be like, what a horrible invention. I can't, how am I going to, we shouldn't get a patent. And you could see it was a painful experience for them. But for me, I'm, I guess, admire of innovation, admire of technology, but not somebody who kind of sees myself as coming up with it myself. I'm kind of similar, I suppose. I
think I'm a more creative than I ever gave myself credit for. But in the innovations you get the opportunity to work on, really, even simple ones, whether it be a game or a toy, or whether it be something like facial recognition software, and everything in between, just really it inspires me. I like to hear how people come up with it, and I also find that in my experience as a patent attorney, the inventions that I thought were the dumbest or the worst were the ones people actually made money on. And it struck me that probably the one thing that sets those who succeed apart from those who don't succeed, and this is a broad generalization, and I'd like to get you to comment on this, because there's a whole host of reasons why you may or may not succeed.
Yeah.
But if you actually are inventing in a space that and you understand, you have a much greater chance of succeeding. And by know and understand, I mean not only the science and technology, but the business, right? I mean, you know what people want. You know what people need. I remember one time an inventor asked me, so what do you think? And I was like, you don't want to know what I think. And he said, no, I do. I said, no, what I think is irrelevant. You know, I'm not your market. You know, and he said, no, I really want to know. And he just kept pestering me. And I told him, I said, I think this is the dumbest idea I've ever seen. And he just started laughing. And he said, I was wondering whether you were going to be honest or not.
Yeah.
And he said, because it is. It's pretty, you know, I just happen to know that there's people who will pay for this because he was in that space. And he was actually a wrestling coach. And he had come up with this aid. And he said, when I take it to matches and I wheel it out on the floor, every coach at the tournament comes up to him and said, where do I get one of those?
I'll have to look it up. Was it like a dummy or something? Or was
yeah.
Okay.
And
I think they have those at my
it was
son's wrestling club.
A pretty elaborate type of thing. And I thought to myself, I said, you know, this looks like a cow to me. You know, and I was so why do you care what I think?
Yeah.
You know that the coaches are lining up to where do I get one of these? He said, I just wanted to know if you were going to be honest with me.
Yeah.
And you haven't ever have an experience like that where you were working on something and you're like, I'm going to be the only one who makes money on this. And then you find out that, no, the inventor really made some good money.
Yeah. Actually, I haven't worked with too many independent inventors. I guess most of the clients that I work with are kind of companies who are really on the cutting edge and they come up with a lot of inventions. So I know they're kind of, and I'm always like, it always amazes me just the idea of inventing. But I think there's some kind of misconception is that, you know, inventors out there who are go out there to obtain a patent because they think like, oh, let me get a patent so I can get rich or whatever. But really, it's like people who are on the cutting edge of whatever they're doing, and they're searching for a solution. There is no solution, and then they run into a problem and they solve that problem. So they kind of, so they're in the position to identify their problem and then to figure out how to solve that problem. And they solve it for themselves and obviously others who might not have that same kind of imagination or ingenuity to do that.
Yeah, it's about problem solving, you know. And as you were just saying that, and before we started, we were just kicking on a little bit about 101 and the patent eligibility guidance and how things have changed, really, you know, over the last 5 or so years. At least at the patent office, you know, it's gotten easier. And when you were just going through that, you know, you have a problem, you need to solve for that problem. And I'm hearing almost like the technical solution to a technical problem approach. And I think that, you know, if you look at inventing like that, there is a problem. I have a solution.
Yeah.
Now, is it economically viable?
Right.
And if you start having those stars line up, you almost can't help but at least have something interesting.
Yeah. And that makes, obviously, even outside of 101, I think that makes for a good patent application where you can tell a compelling story like that about why it's what after the fact it might seem very simple,
right.
as some inventions, the best inventions often do, but to tell that story about, you know, kind of like why that was significant about what you came up with, and obviously be careful about how you do all that, but I think it makes for a compelling story, and so they can appreciate that at the patent office or even after you get a patent. I think that makes it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the problems, and not all of the problems, but a lot of the problems came about because attorneys started drafting applications in a almost a hide the ball kind of way. You know, like you'd read the application and you get to the end, or you read the patent and you get to the end. And it's like, okay, well, what actually here is new? I don't really get it. And that I think is just doing a disservice to everyone, myself. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's, you know, when I started practicing, that's kind of how I was trained. You know, there was a case where somebody mentioned one thing in the application, let's leave it out.
Right.
Let's not let's not explain it all, like what the problem is, what the solution is.
Yeah.
Not even in terms of not using those words, but not even kind of the concept. And I agree with you, and I think maybe kind of maybe the overreaction to what the patent system was caused by patent attorneys being overly clever and probably not even being strategically overly clever, kind of just being like check the box overly clever, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I think you're right. And I think there's no rule that a patent attorney can't overreact to.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, and when I teaching new folks how to practice, and whether they be in law school or after they've graduated, now they have a registration number.
Yeah.
I always encourage them to not to ignore any bright line rules that they've been told, obviously by their bosses. You got to do what the boss wants, but maybe spend some time trying to figure out what the rule is there for.
Yeah.
So that you don't accidentally follow the bright line rule, but actually fall into the same problem it was intended to prevent.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
And I was going to say, I think if it's important, I've actually always thought about it. There's, attorneys who are kind of, in law school, they're taught to read a lot of cases and then apply those cases, and then they start practicing. And it's easy to kind of get a narrow vision where, you're kind of doing what you're doing. A new federal circuit case comes out and you react to it or whatever. And I think it's kind of important, actually, what you do with IPWatchdog is kind of to educate about the broader context of what's going on, what's really going on with this federal circuit that they would come to this decision. Maybe look at the the parties who are involved, what type of case it is, what are the other things going on policy-wise, to kind of see where does that decision really fit in, and if there's another case like that with a very different set of facts, would they kind of reach a
right.
And I think the answer is no. Yeah. So
often it's different parties, same facts, different parties, and I think the case would come out differently. And I was talking to somebody recently about, because there's also a whole host of, I think, unwritten truths at the federal circuit. We all know them to be true. You're not going to be able to hold on to $1 billion verdict, not currently.
Yeah.
And somewhere between, I think, 400 million and $1 billion is the number where different judges on the court get different level of agita. But what's amazing, I said this, and I'll share it with you and get your thoughts on it. I don't think the federal circuit, even as it's constituted currently, would have a problem with a patent owner collecting $2, $3, $4 billion. It just can't be from 2 or 3 companies. If they're going to collect $2, $3, $4 billion across several thousand companies, all of whom are licensing it for a fair amount, but none of them have to write a check that's too big, I think the federal circuit is going to be okay with that all day long. I think where things have gone awry, and this is not in the law anywhere I could see, but it's this unwritten rule. There's so many high-tech areas where you only have but a few players. And, like with phones, there's Apple, there's Samsung, there's Google.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a few other players, right? But those are the 3, probably have 95% of the market, right? You're never going to get $1 billion out of any of them, no matter what they're doing.
Yeah.
At least to stick. And that's what I see. And so I don't know where this goes, but I think it leads to a set of laws that make it feel to me like they're making it up as they go along. Now, I know that's not what they're doing. And I do think that they're calling balls and strikes as they see it. But there's to use a NASCAR now, there's like a restrictor plate there that is preventing it from riding free.
Yeah.
And I don't know. What do you think I'm overreacting? Do you think that's true?
I guess I'm not an expert on the damages case law, and I think there's people who are unhappy about the state of it is from both sides. But I think I 100% agree with you. I actually just interviewed Judge Dyke from the Federal Circuit, and I'm 100% sure that every case that he gets, he looks at the case before him, he looks at all the decisions, and he comes to what he thinks is the right decision. But it's like an interesting psychological thing where somehow the right decision always fits in with what, the public at large or whatever, the constituency at large would be fine with living. Right. And you see an interesting dynamic, actually, I thought, at the at the USPTO when it was set up, the PTAB was set up, and they were invalidating all these patents. Somebody else I interviewed, Eric Spangenberger, he started this thing with Kyle Bass, a hedge fund manager, where they were going to get all these pharma patents invalidated in the same way. That never happened.
Right.
And part of it was obviously they were having, they didn't need to go through each individual judge and say like, all right, this is a pharma patent, you can't invalidate it. Nothing like that was going on, even though they were at the PTO, they were worried about it. I think these PTAB judges were, aware. You're not going to start invalidating these billion-dollar drugs. So I think in the Federal Circuit, I think it's the same kind of thing where they see this kind of billion-dollar verdict, then it probably their first impression, which I think is always very important, is that something probably went wrong.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, and it's it is frustrating though, because I do think it almost feels to me like the way that the law has been developing over the last 10 or 15 years, maybe even more, has at least probably since eBay. And maybe even slightly before that, because I think that was a moment that captured the sentiment. So maybe it's been 20 years. But I think what you see is a situation where the patents have gotten weaker. It's gotten easier to infringe. It's gotten easier to stretch things out. And then when you do pay at the back end, if you have to, you're not paying what is really fair value based on the multiplication. Yeah. I feel like you're paying something else, and I think it's gotten worse and worse over time. I don't know that it's gotten worse over the last several years or anything, but I think what that has done is it has really benefited the incumbents, the large companies who control the manufacturing and control the channels of distribution, have done very well. And smaller companies, which, they can be literally, a lot of these Silicon Valley companies were garage or started in a dorm room, with a couple folding tables and a few chairs, and I don't think our laws favor that anymore. So you get fewer and fewer incumbents that control and dominate the markets. So then when they do infringe, the number is just so astronomical, because there's billions of smart devices all over the world. I mean, even if it's, and they sell the smartphones now for what, over $1,000, $1,200 is a cheap one. Yeah. And even if you get $1 per phone, that's $1 billion, or $2 billion, or whatever the number is.
Yeah. And I guess it'd be interesting if you actually saw like a litigation like that by humongous players like that, where the innovators of the 5G technology, the big ones, if they actually saw some of these supreme, most of these cases settle right before we get to a point. So I guess we never kind of really see, but I think it is an interesting dynamic where, I mean, also like this is to get into standard essential patent stuff, the hold out debate or whatever. But if the system only works because parties settle, right, or they reach licensing agreement, right? If everybody said, all right, let me go till then and see what the Federal Circuit does, then it would all fall apart. And but then I think there should be some penalty, right? If you're the infringer and you actually litigate it till the very end, you go up to the Federal Circuit and you lose there, I think you should be paying some kind of sum which makes people say like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't roll the dice on that.
Right. And that's, I think Judge Michel has been talking about that sort of thing is that the Federal Circuit really needs to let at least some of these verdicts stand. Yeah. Because otherwise, it's the patent's it's not fearful. I think the big story in the Apple versus Samsung, global really patent war is that Apple's patents turned out to be not worth very much. Yeah. Samsung copied them. I think everybody knows that, and then their patents were unable to stop Samsung except for the design patents. Right. And then when they got an award, it just kept going back up to the Federal Circuit, and they kicked down, and then the next iteration would be less damages, and they go back up and they get kicked back down, and the last it just kept getting chipped away and eroded. I think at some point things will change, but like for your clients that really need patents, and not by that I mean not the ones who are just, and there's nothing wrong with this, but the ones who accumulate patents so that we have a big war chest of patents, so that if and when we need to go after others, or others come after us, or we want to do licensing, but like for those who need the exclusive rights, where are they at? I mean, are they still applying in the U.S.? I'm sure, but like, are they looking at other jurisdictions? Are they diversifying overseas more?
Yeah, I think actually when I started my podcast, I think one of the last questions I would always ask is like, all right, tell us something to be optimistic about the patent system. I'm sure I asked you that. I listened to all the things you did, and I guess I've the things over doing this podcast over 5 years now is like the one thing that I've been positive about is like how much ingenuity there is. Whatever happens in the patent system, there's things to overcome. So the bigger players who are companies really depend on patents, and I'm thinking about the pharma companies, some of these big standard essential patents holders who come up with the underlying technology for cellular technology and so forth. They still know how to build a valuable portfolio in the U.S. And it takes a lot of resources, and you don't just file a patent application and then obtain whatever you get and say, okay, I'm done with that. It takes about kind of being very rigorous during prosecution. It takes being very rigorous during allowance, being very rigorous when you're filing a drafting application to make sure that you have all these options available, and that you still need to build. You need to have a portfolio in the U.S. You can't kind of ignore that. But I think obviously, I think me and you have both kind of covered that. Is that they do get excited about other jurisdictions where it's easier to enforce patents, where when they do have these global litigations, that some of these infringers can't just say, all right, well, we're going to keep litigating this for 10 years. So I think Brazil and obviously Europe with the UPC kind of make it excited. So I think really it's kind of it's a combination of all that. But I think at the end of the day, you still need to find a way. If patents are important to your company and you believe that, you need to find a way to build a valuable portfolio. And I think a mistake that a lot of companies made, and I see actually a lot of like Chief IP Counsel and General Patent Counsel, and I see actually in-house counsel very excited about your programming, I think for the same reason, is because when all of that happened with patents, and I think there's a kind of a kind of overreaction to how maybe the patent enforcement at the time, a lot of these companies said, okay, patents are worthless now, but we should still get them. And then they still have to come up with some reason, right? Defensive portfolio, or, we kind of, whatever it is, it's like an indicator about our technological innovation. But I think much more in-house counsel, I see they're like, especially the sophisticated one, are taking a step back and saying like, all right, no, we're getting these patents. We might as well try to figure out how to get valuable patents, not just to get patents so we can like add something to the notch. And I think there's kind of at least I've noticed an anecdotal trend to that across where I think at least they're starting to think about it. I'm not sure everybody has found a solution that fits their company and their inventors and so forth, but I think there's a lot more thought that's going into that.
Yeah, and I've referred to this as sort of a schizophrenia, because there are people like, for example, Google gets a lot of patents, and there are people at Google that they spend all day, every day complaining about the U.S. patent system, but there's also people that obviously spend a lot of time at Google every day trying to get patents, and and it's interesting to hear people say, "Oh, well, we're just doing it for defensive purposes." Well, then why not just publish? Why not? You don't need a patent if this is for defense to make sure some quote unquote patent troll doesn't get the rights. Then just write an article, publish it, you know, be like IBM used to do with the IBM publications, you know, and then you could patent just a small fraction of it, because I don't think Google has a licensing program either. I mean, it must be nice to be making so much money with their advertising, you know, their search terms, that they don't need the several billions of dollars a year, surely, that they could license their patent portfolio for.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the talk about the defensive portfolio had to do with like, well, if somebody sues us, then we'll have something.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works. Just because somebody sues you doesn't make your patents magically
better.
Better. Yeah.
Or infringed.
Yeah. And then some of these companies that do complain the most, you know, a part of their story, and I think I covered on my podcast, is they want to be able to tell the story. We're actually the biggest patent holders. Right. So we care about the patent system as much as anybody. So, you know, we want it to be this certain way, and that's kind of why they do that. But then they complain about all the bad patents everybody else is getting, but you look through their portfolio and you're like, well,
yeah, it's kind of hard to say.
It's not very different from what
you know. And it's funny that you say that. I think fundamentally it boils down to this. You know, we're in an election season. I'm not going to make it political or anything, but I think it is fair to say that most Americans don't like Congress. You know, you just look at opinion polls, and most people think Congress is usually at or about the level of a used car salesman, is where Congress comes in on these surveys of would you like what they're doing, do you like them, etc. But then when you ask them about their member of Congress, oh, I like my guy, or I like my congresswoman. It's everybody else's congressperson that's the problem, not my guy. You know, and that shows up over and over again, year after year, decade after decade, that people don't like Congress, but they do like their person. Yeah. I think there's a lot of that goes on in the patent area, right? It's like, I don't dislike patents. I'm like, for example, my patents. My patents are great. It's your patents that suck. Yeah. Well, mine are great, you know, and so it's sort of the way we used to joke around. Well, what's the definition of a patent troll? Somebody who's suing me. that's a patent troll. Yeah. And
I think that's very interesting, because, like, you know, the people who obtain these companies, for these big companies, you know, they're talking to the engineers, they're talking to the business, they're talking to the inventors, and they are solving real problems, and they're filing patent applications for those, and they can appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Well, the guy who's handling maybe the litigation that comes the company's way, he has a different perspective.
Right.
He's saying, oh, we're solving those problems, not not this random person.
Yeah, you know, but I still wonder. I just don't understand why, and I guess, you know, it's like these jokes, or, you know, we say, well, and I don't even know that it's a joke. It's, you know, would Bill Gates bend over to pick up a $20 bill if he dropped it? And you're like, well, it wouldn't be worth his while, because in the time it would take him to bend over to pick it up, he's already made more than $20, right? You know, so I guess I get, but I just think that if I were running a company, I would try and maximize what I'm doing, and I do think that, you know, Google's leaving a lot of money on the table, and not to say that they have to go after mom and pops, or you know, like, because there are people don't like it when I say it. I upset everybody. There are patent trolls. They exist, right? I mean, you hear the stories about these people that are just engaging in shakedowns. I just read an opinion from a court where, and I'll probably write an article about this later on this week, that this attorney has filed like 50 or 60 cases. He's not even admitted in the state. He's not admitted in the court, and he says he files it as pro hoc anticipated. Yeah. You know, and then he never gets around to requesting pro hoc, you know, and it's like, well, that's just really the unauthorized practice of law then. Yeah. You know, and it's like, okay, well, if you're doing that, then what else are you doing? And as it turns out, he's about to be sanctioned for failure to do any form of investigating prior to filing a lawsuit. Rule 11 sanction. I mean, this is how bad this. I mean, so there are bad actors out there, right? They do exist. they exist in an area of the marketplace, I think, where they're just literally trying to shake you down. And it's not even for nuisance value, because nuisance value in a patent litigation would be at least several $100,000, if not $1 million, right? They're trying to shake people down for $10,000, $20,000, $50,000.
Yeah.
And that, so I'm sympathetic to that. But I look at this and I think that there's a lot of companies that could be doing more with what they're getting, at least enough to pay for the program itself.
Yeah.
Without needing to shake somebody down for $10,000 for a patent infringement.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, I actually discussed, I think, my earliest interview with Judge Rader. I said, maybe they should just pass a law that you can't sue somebody for that has a certain less amount of damages or whatever, like just get all those bad stories off the table. But I think you are seeing bigger companies that are, I guess, monetizing their portfolios in ways which they were adamantly against a few years ago in terms of like selling their portfolios to others who might do it on their behalf. So I think you do see it. I think it just depends when where the company is in their cycle, right? One day $1 billion might be nothing for that company. Another year when they're operating at a loss, that might be a significant amount of money, and they're more than happy to embrace it. So things change for the same company over years, and I think some of these even bigger companies, let's say they're going to be successful over long term, they still need the innovation to happen, right?
Right.
They still need these startups to be willing to, these founders to put everything on the line, to invest, to start these companies, to think that they can have faith in the patent system and build these products and build that, because that's where they get all their technology for. And that's that. But again, it's like one of these things. It's very short-sighted that I think it's two dynamics. One is like each individual situation is, the big company has a way to tell the story about why it's okay for them to take that invention. But also I think it's kind of the people within these companies who deal with this kind of stuff. I again started practicing. I have friends who they just ended up in this defensive patent litigation or whatever. So to these people are getting filed hundreds of lawsuits a day or whatever it is, and to them it's like, this is out of control. They don't think about I'm doing this on behalf of a company that's worth trillions of dollars. Right. So maybe that's reasonable then.
Yeah, and I'm sure these companies see an awful lot of stuff that just is terrible. The thing though that I just wish when we had gone through and changed the laws, we had addressed the abuses, because it seemed like we created, for example, as a part of the AIA, the ability to submit prior art to examiners so they don't make these mistakes before they issue patents. Yeah. Nobody uses it. I mean, almost nobody submits prior art that way. We have post-grant review, which, if the patent office makes a mistake, you can go back right away and you can not only challenge the patent for 102 and 103, but 101 and 112. And very, very few people use that. And it's like, and then I get it's also about expense, because the whole idea of the IPR, for example, was to make it a cheaper alternative. And all it's done is made it a more expensive addition to litigation. And so they don't go after these people that are constantly the real trolls. I mean, that's what really needs to happen is, if the industry wants to do some good, it should go after the patents that these real trolls that are engaging in shakedown, really kind of extortion-like behavior. That's what some courts have called it even. Go after their patents. But you don't see that. You don't see any of the collectives going after those patents either. And I don't understand why. I mean, if you made that business model ineffective, you can't make money because nobody's going to pay you the $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 anymore, and you're going to lose your patents.
Yeah.
That's what I thought maybe we were doing. It doesn't appear as if that's what we did.
Yeah. And I mean, there's things like that that go on the margins of any kind of litigation, right?
Right.
Ambulance chasers or whatever you want to call them. And I guess I don't think the reaction to that is like, well, we should we should crack down on all that kind of litigation. But
no, it exists because the judicial process is inefficient.
Yeah.
It takes time. And like if you could get time in front of the district court judge early on in the case, and they would see that no, this is just a shakedown. I don't think any district court judge in the U.S. would allow their courtroom to be center stage for an extortion plot.
Yeah.
But it's not just patents; it's all kinds of people leverage the judicial inefficiency, and it sucks. And what sucks even more is it doesn't seem like we've forwarded the ball. We've done, I think, a lot of damage to the U.S. patent system. I think we've done a lot of damage to startups, and then consequently, I think long-term innovation has damaged because you get the best, most creative breakthroughs from people who are taking risks in startups. And so I think we've done a lot of damage without fixing the problem.
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah. So, okay. So we've talked some substance here. Let's go back to maybe talk about you specifically. You just recently joined Foley, right?
That's right.
And
yeah.
you're in their DC office, right?
Yeah.
So how's that going? How are you liking the new digs, or do you even go into the office? What's the skinny?
I do. We're the DC office located right in Georgetown Waterfront. It's one of my favorite areas in DC, so I enjoy going there, and it's kind of refreshing to get out of your house.
Right. Well, you have some young kids too, right?
Yeah, I have three boys. Yeah.
So you need to get out of the house. I tell people.
I think it helps everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's mental sanity. I tell people, that I'm already starting to hear from younger people who say, "I'll never work for a company ever again who doesn't let me work from home." And I'm like, "Oh, you think that now?" But once you start having kids, you're going to be begging to go back to the office.
Yeah. But the reason I joined was, I guess, less about superficial things like that, but more about, and it has to do with some of the things that we discussed about being part of a team that kind of values patents. Mm-hmm. And I think, at that moment in time, which we discussed, where, these companies said, all right, let's just get a bunch of patents. We don't care what we're getting. I think the reaction of some outside counsel was, and at the same time, these companies were like, all right, how cheaply can you do this?
Right.
And I think the reaction of a lot of outside counsel at the time, and maybe it was smart at the time, is like, all right, prices are going to keep going down. Let's figure out how we can kind of keep up with it
Right.
to a point where the clients don't complain and we can still get something out of the patent office, right?
Right.
And I think, like I said, the trend that I noticed over time recently is that, sophisticated, I guess, clients are saying, not so fast. If I'm going to go through this process of obtaining patents, let me figure out the best way. Let's make this worthwhile. And luckily, as I was kind of thinking about this, I had a chance. Somebody who joined Foley, he said, and we've kind of discussed that idea, and I've admired how he kind of thought about these things. Naijing, he said, do you want to join me in that kind of doing that with me here? And it was an exciting opportunity to do that. And he kind of really focuses on all right, this is the state of play, Section 101 and everything. Mm-hmm. How do we navigate that to get the best possible results for the clients? And for the clients who actually want those best possible results,
Right.
If a client is not interested in that, maybe it's not then it's not a good fit. But for clients that do, it's kind of exciting and invigorating to practice with somebody like that, where they kind of appreciate those maybe extra ideas, and so it's like it's a level of excitement that you have.
It's a different level of practicing, right? Yeah. It's not, and not to say that where you were or any of the places you've been previously are mills. I don't think they are, but mills do exist, and you get patents for people, and you get what you can get, and you move on, and that's a different level, and certainly also when you have clients that don't necessarily need or want a strong patent, that's a different level than when you really have folks that really care about the quality for whatever reason because they want an asset that matters.
Yeah.
And you have the ability to do some strategic prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, clients get patents for a lot of different reasons, and a lot of them are very good, and they're very different. And I think it's important for the client to think about it, but also for the asset counsel that they work with to keep that in mind as well, and to kind of do that. But yeah, I think it's.
Well, yeah. I mean, I used to tell people, it's like, look, okay, why do you want the patent?
Yeah.
I need to know because that will actually affect the quote, right? Like if you want to get a patent that you can frame and hang on your wall, and you want to participate in this process, we can do that.
Yeah.
Because then you're not going to care that the claim is 3 columns long. That doesn't matter to you. That's not why you're doing it. But now if you're trying to raise money, go into an industry where there are some larger incumbents already, well, that's another different kind of reason to get a patent.
Yeah.
And all of this matters. And I do think that at times, sometimes in the past, I don't think it's this way as much anymore, but I think in the past, patent attorneys were just very good at getting patents and not necessarily that good about asking the why you need it question.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's exactly. I mean, it's one. I actually had a very interesting. I think my practice experience was interesting. I started practicing this right before Bilski, right around that time, and I did a lot of business method stuff. Mm-hmm. And even before Bilski and Alice, these one-on-one cases, it was very hard to get a patent. In those business method art units, and especially after Bilski and Alice came out. It became like exponentially harder,
right,
especially if you filed those applications beforehand to get it. And it was like, all right, the only goal is to get a patent. Any patent is better than never patent. Yeah. And the last 8 years, I guess, I had the good fortune of working with for a company that obtains a lot of standard essential patents and licenses those patents. And their whole goal was, no, we need to get a patent that actually is going to read on the standard. If it's anything short of that, it's worthless for us or whatever it is. So it's like, and for any other client, it's important, I guess, if a client doesn't have a goal, but it's like, you got to have a balance of those things, right? You got to have, you don't want to spend millions of dollars trying to get every patent, perfect claim scope, and, litigating every single issue. But you got to be aware of that about it's got to cover something that's going to exist in the real world, or
right.
Otherwise, why are we doing what we're doing?
Right, or there's no point, right? Yeah. There's no point.
Or potentially might exist in the real world, whatever it is. So,
right.
And these are hard things to kind of predict and assess, and it's always easier to do in hindsight.
Well, it is, but that leads me to something I wanted to ask. What are your thoughts about what's going on with prosecution laches? Does that scare the hell out of you? I mean, it scares me because, the federal circuit has said if it's been pending for 6 years, laches is presumed.
Yeah,
it's like there's a whole lot of cases that get issued that have been pending for more than 6 years through no fault of the patent applicant.
Yeah.
And if that's the new, I don't know what the long-term outcome is going to be, because it fundamentally changes everything, because you keep these applications open on purpose. You write them large on purpose, and then you go after piece by piece. It just, I don't know where this ends, but it scares me.
Yeah, especially, the Judge Alsop, the district court decision, which I guess I preceded or succeeded there. But it does, because, as we all know, it was never possible to get a perfect patent. It's even harder today, putting that aside. And, I always... I don't think it's even worthwhile, unless your goal is to just hang a patent on the wall, to just pursue one patent. That's kind of like, as from an enforceability perspective, it's probably as valuable as 0 patents. And the way you really build a strong portfolio that you can rely on your patents is you got to file lots of different original applications, you know, and then once you get one of these patent applications allowed, then you got to see, okay, how do I kind of build weave some kind of basket of protection? You know, I don't want to use the word thicket,
Right.
Well, but that is somebody's gonna try to invalidate one of these patents. Somebody's gonna try to design around it, and they're gonna be taking the invention from you. There's gonna be emails about it. They're gonna be willfully doing it. But you got to catch the stuff, you know, like,
Right.
and I think it's only fair to do that. And I don't know if it's like, it's another kind of a made up thing to overreact to bad actors who might be like 40 years later, you know, they came up with microprocessor, now they're trying to cover, you know, like an operating system or something like that. But yeah, it does scare me. I think it scares me to an extent. You know, I think, again, the patent owners who have a lot of resources are going to find solutions. They're just going to file even more applications, just original applications in the beginning, and kind of take measures to do that. The ones who I think are really hurt are the startups, because they're the ones who are like, all right, I'm going to gather this money to file a good patent application. Let's say, I don't know, $20,000 budget or whatever it is. To do that, file it, and then, and at that point, that's when they can start building their patent portfolio. Right. At that point, and now they're not going to be able to do that.
No, because if it made sense 4 or 5 years down the road, you could always go back for more.
Yeah.
And now that whole thing is, I think, in question. There's a lot of stuff.
But yeah, I guess, what do you think is driving it? Is it that? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I have been saying for some time that so much of U.S. patent policy can be understood over the last several years when you understand that they being the administration, wants to do something about high drug prices.
Yeah.
You know, so they want fewer patents. They call it a thicket. I don't think thickets exist. Myself, that's a long conversation for another day, I suppose. But and you know, with the terminal disclaimer rules, they were coming after continuations. I think they would like to limit continuations if they could. You know, prosecution laches. There's a whole host of reasons why they're trying to get people to have fewer patents, but not just any people. It's the people who have the most valuable innovations. You know, like if you have like a yo-yo for your dog, you know, you can have as many patents on that as you want.
Yeah.
But if you have something that's really groundbreaking innovation, like you came up with a pill that somebody could swallow and it cures cancer. Okay, well, it seems like on that level they don't want people to have the protection, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been saying that. Now, I don't know whether that's true. We're at the point where I just published the agenda for our life sciences program, and I put two panels together, juxtaposed them, because there's the issue with, you know, terminal disclaimers, continuations, like I just went through, right?
Yeah.
Saying too many patents. There's the IRA. We have to, quote unquote, negotiate drug prices, which is really where you take what we're going to pay you, and if you don't, then you're going to get fined. It's not a negotiation on any level. And the complaining is, oh, you're getting too many patents. You prevent this from falling into the public domain for 40 or 50 years, which is crazy. It doesn't happen. Just not true. Yeah. But all of those parade of horribles about so many patents, right? And then as I was putting together panels, I want to do a panel on the patent cliff, because Humira just lost patent protection, and there's a host of blockbuster drugs, like about 8 or 10, and by blockbuster we're talking like 8 to 10 billion a year or more in sales, that over the next year or two, those patents are going to go away.
Yeah.
You know, and so how can you have a patent cliff and a patent thicket at the same time? You just can't. I mean, so I don't know anymore what really is going on behind these things, but they tell a great story that people, and they gloss over the fact that, like, if the pharmaceutical company is really innovating and they get an advance on the drug, that's not the original drug. The original drug's falling in the public domain. You want it, take it, have it. But what it seems like is they want everybody to have the latest and greatest. Now, and pharmaceuticals is not my area, so I don't know enough. But if there are marginal patents of quote unquote evergreening really is a problem, then examiners stop issuing those patents. But they issue the patents, they examine them, they say they're non-obvious, and they give them. I mean, there's a problem there in search of a solution, and I don't know what the problem is, and I don't know what the solution is because what people say doesn't make any sense based on the facts.
Yeah. No, I at the risk of saying pundits, I don't think a cure fits the disease. Actually, I interviewed Steve Kaltreiter, who's the former general patent counsel of Eli Lilly. And before I interviewed him, I took a look at Eli Lilly's patent portfolio, and I saw they used to get way more patents than they do now. I don't know if they used to get like 250 years a year. Now they get only like 50 or something like that. And I was like kind of shocked, how does a company that like Eli Lilly size get that few patents? And he said actually for a company, he's a big Moneyball guy, and he said for a company like Eli Lilly, who has these like blockbuster drugs, they don't actually need a lot of patents. They get whatever the one patent gets in the orange book, they protect it for whatever 8 years they get after all the FDA scrutiny. They make $100 billion off that, and then they move or whatever it is, and they move on to the next one. And I was talking to somebody actually else also this. Pharmaceuticals outside my field, but I was talking to somebody and he said, yeah, these big companies have kind of resigned themselves to say, this is how the system works. We'll just get, we'll get this one patent, we'll cover it for a limited time, we'll make money and move on. But I think what hurts, again, is not those big pharma companies that they want to, make out into the bad guys. It hurts these like other companies that are trying to do the innovative stuff for the overlooked sectors of the market that don't make as much money, right?
Right.
If, there's some kind of disease that impacts only, 100,000, I'm not, even 1 million people or whatever, these big drug companies are not going to invest in it because they won't be able to make their money back. It's these, or maybe they come up with some drug and one of these smaller companies comes up with a new method of use or something like that to help a subgroup that's been suffering, since the world has existed, and they're the ones who are being harmed by all these innovations of how to curtail the patent system, and it's kind of just sad because, at the end of the day, it's just regular people who are getting hurt by that. And I don't know. I don't know how it works because obviously the people who are doing this lobbying. They're sophisticated. They know what's going on. And I think to some degree it is about, I agree with you, it is about lowering drug prices. And it's like, all right, whatever story we can tell that's compelling. And
that's
and the patents help with that.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's like whatever story we can tell to get what we want through. Yeah. That and I think it boils down to that. I think it's just that simple. Which is unfortunate, I suppose, but because I think it leads to really bad policy. Because I do think I totally agree with you. Is the companies that get hurt are the risk-taking smaller companies that if we could put a little wind under their wings, could fly, could really take off. And it'll be interesting to see. There's emergent biopharma companies are increasingly responsible for more and more innovation. But we'll see what happens, whether they're going to continue to be responsible, because those are small players. They have to be able to protect what it is that they come up with. And if they don't, and the other thing too is this stuff is, as it turns out, it's just hard. It's very hard, and I think what I would prefer is having a whole lot of people looking for the golden goose. Yeah. And when they find it, then they'll say, "Oh, thank you for finding it. We're going to take that away from you." I don't think that's the solution. It gets people to look for the next golden goose.
Yeah, and it's not even the golden goose. It's like these companies, they would find a way to make it work, right? But they need to find a way to make it work. If everybody in the government is fighting them every step of the way, they're not going to pursue that to make it work. And like you said, I think it's at least from what I've read, these big pharmaceutical companies they're acquiring more and more. Once they see something successful, then they acquire it.
Yep.
And that's how they're forced to operate.
Well, but thank God that these companies that are in this space are trying to do good. I think that they do try and do good. I think they want to help patients, because I think to myself, if I was a CEO at one of these companies, I would be trying to push my researchers into like lifestyle drugs. I mean, because it seems like people have got all kinds of money, obviously, for things that make them happy. And for example, the erectile dysfunction drugs have been very successful, and but you don't hear people clamoring to bust those patents. You don't hear people clamoring to say, "Oh, you're getting too many patents. There's a thicket there." Yeah. You don't see Medicare or anybody trying to quote unquote negotiate those prices down. What they're trying to negotiate down are the life-saving, life-sustaining drugs that really alter people's lives for the better. To make it livable, literally make life livable for a lot of people. And I just think, why are they still going down that path? There has to be some altruism. I know it's money; they're trying to make money. But if it was all about money, there would be cheaper ways and safer ways to make money in the biopharma sector, it seems to me.
I agree. At least those that I know, I think they're not motivated by money. It's hard to imagine, I guess, what they have to deal in terms of like they're going to the. And I think USPTO is probably the best of the agencies that they might deal with. Some of these other agencies were like, we're trying to help people, and
and
they're just like fighting them every step of the way.
I totally agree. And certainly the investors care about the money and they're looking at the return, but the people and the scientists, the frontline innovators, they're really trying to just help people. So we've been talking for about an hour. It's hard to believe an hour has gone by so quickly. I really appreciate you being here. As a final question, what can we expect to see out of you and Closette moving forward now that you've switched firms? Is it all systems go, or are you going to make any changes, or do we just have to stay tuned and wait and see?
Yeah, so fortunately, Foley has given me the blessing to keep the podcast going. So I'm going to actually, keep doing what I'm doing, which is kind of just try to share the perspectives of everybody in the IP field. Those who might disagree with what we said today, and those who might think we might have been too reluctant to say what we say. I think one thing that I've when I started doing the podcast, I used to do more, my first gigs were federal circuit judges, right? But I think that a very interesting perspective is really of the Chief IP Counsel and, the kind of the executives who actually set the strategy in motion, because they're kind of like the where the rubber hits the road, right?
Right. No, I totally agree. And we've been I've been spending more time trying to talk to people in that space and get them to programs and talk and that sort of thing. And you learn an awful lot by listening to the client.
Yeah, exactly. And they have a perspective of like, all right, all this flood of it, like we think there's a flood of information, but the in-house counsel has all this flood of information. And now their job is like, all right, now there's these business people who don't know anything about patents. How do I,
right?
How do I help them tell? Like, what do I tell them or don't tell them? Whatever. And I think it's a very interesting problem that kind of like just helping obtain a good patent for your client is not enough. I don't think.
Right.
It's really for the in-house counsel. So I think it's like I'm just super curious about that topic about and I know you've covered in a lot of the programs that you've done is, how do you make the case for patents? And I think there's kind of a miracle almost, regardless of what happens with the patent system. Companies keep filing patents, they keep filing patents. But at moments like this, like I said, where some of these, kind of these strategic in-house counsel and executives are taking a step back and saying, no, why are we doing this? And what should we be doing? And what should I be telling the business about this? I'm just fascinated by that question at the time, so I want to kind of share what others are doing and kind of find an answer to that. So that's kind of. Hopefully, you'll get that from some of my upcoming episodes.
Well, good. We will definitely keep listening. Keep up the good work. Foley would be foolish to not encourage you to do this. You're doing great stuff. Everybody in the industry is familiar with
about
it.
Foley itself. I guess I've been there a short time, but I love the firm. It's full of very nice people, and it's very diverse in the way people practice and all that. So it's been a great learning experience and a great kind of opening my mind to that, all that. So it's been a very rewarding so far.
Well, good. Well, congratulations, and I really appreciate you sitting down with me today.
All right. Thanks, Gene. This has been a lot of fun, as always.